Afternoon. National Assembly the National Assembly for Wales is now in session, and the first item this afternoon is questions of the First Minister, and question 1, Ellen Jones.
Pa drafodaethau mae'r Prif Weinidog wedi cael gyda Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig ynglŷn â chyflwyno baner y Deyrnas Unedig yn hytrach na baner Cymru ar drwyddedau gyrru?
Doedd ddim ymgynghoriad gyda ni ynglŷn â'r newidiadau. Mae'r Gweinidog wedi sgrifennu i Lywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig mwyn codi'r mater hyn. Dyle bod wrth gwrs o leia cael y dewis.
Diolch i chi am eich ymateb, Prif Weinidog. Un o'n etholwyr i gychwynodd y ddeiseb i wrthod Jac yr Undeb ar drwydded yrru. Mae 6,000 o bobl wedi llofnodi'r ddeiseb yna. Llywodraeth San Steffan wedi dweud y bydd y faner Jac yr Undeb ar y drwyddedau yn cryfhau hunaniaeth Brydeinig ac undod. Mae'n hymeis dy fi drwy orfodaeth gan wladwriaeth mae cryfhau hunaniaeth ac undod. Mae'n anharo i ymateb y Tories i fygythiad UKIP sydd o bosib wrth wraidd y polisi yma. Mater yr unigolyn yw penderfynu ar hunaniaeth ag undod, a mae nifer o'n etholwyr i ac o bosib y rhai chi hefyd yn ystyried eu hunain yn Gymru cyn i bod nhw yn ystyried eu hunain yn Brydeinwyr. Fel cyfaddawd felly, a dwi'n gobeithio fod hyn yn rhan o'r llythyr i chi fel Llywodraeth wedi ddanfon at Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Gyfunol. Fel cyfaddawd, ydych chi wedi gofyn, a felly newch chi hyn yn glir yn eich ateb, ydych chi wedi gofyn bod o leia y ddrai goch yn cael ei chynnwys ar y drwydded yn ei fod opsiwn i unigolyn i gael y ddrai goch yn hytrach na Jac yr Undeb mwyn diffynio i hunaniaeth nhw eu hunain fel unigolion.
Bydd hwn yn rhywbeth mynd i'n symud mlaen gyda. Mae hwn yn digwydd wrth gwrs gyda'r platiau rifau ar geir. Ac wrth gwrs beth weles i wrth diwetha, yr esgus oedd yn cael ei roi oedd y pris. Wedi hwnna ddim yn ddigonol, wrth gwrs. Mi oedd yna drafod mawr ynglŷn â hwn pan oedd yna drafod ynglŷn â cael Cymraeg ar y pasbort. Mae hwnna wrth gwrs wedi newid o leia ar y dudalen flan, tu fewn ta beth. Ond na, bydd ni yn sicrhau bod ni'n symud y mater hwn ymlaen mwyn o'r dewis i bobl.
Keith Davis.
Diolch. Well, all is well and good to promote the Welsh flag on driving licences and elsewhere, and no one is a prouder Welshman than I am. It does nothing to help the cause when we see public representatives using appalling language to refer to people who are part of our communities in Wales. First Minister, will you join me in condemning recent comments from Councillor Plaid, Councillor Eirig Gwyn, who disgracefully refer to opponents of a planning application in Gwynedd as...
Planning application with the driving licence? I think not.
It's to do about hunaniaeth, about being seen as a person living...
I think you're stretching it a little far, if I may say. So can you come to a question?
Okay. Do you agree with me that calling people a gallery of immigrants has no part to play in public discourse in Wales?
Yes, I think the remarks were very unfortunate. These are remarks not made by somebody wet behind the ears, but by a very experienced politician, somebody who was a former member of the European Parliament and now a councillor. If a UKIP councillor had used these remarks, then of course we would all be condemning those remarks. I don't think we can have different standards for those in other parties. And I hope, of course, that Plaid Cymru, whose councillor, of course, uttered these remarks, will take the appropriate action as a matter for them, of course.
Byron Davis on driving
Thank you very
licences.
much, Presiding Officer. Back to driving licences then, First Minister. I can see why the Nationalists would not want to strengthen the UK sense of national identity by displaying a union flag on our driving licences, despite the UK driving licence being issued and organised at a UK authority level. But as a proud Welshman myself, will you, First Minister, agree with me that many people in Wales are both proud to be Welsh and British, and will you, like me, carry a new bilingual driving licence with a union flag with pride, emphasising the fact that you can be proud to be both Welsh and British?
I think he's made a very coherent argument for people having a choice. I think people should have that opportunity. First of all, it's not a UK driving licence, it's a GB driving licence. Northern Ireland has its own driver licensing system, and they have a European Union flag on their licences, as it happens, not a union flag. So the idea of pulling people together within the union is not quite the correct argument. Otherwise, Northern Ireland would also have a union flag, although, as we know, there are complications in Northern Ireland that make that well nigh impossible. But no, my belief is, and he is right to say, that most people in Wales find themselves in a position where they are proud to be both Welsh and British, and therefore they should have the opportunity to choose which flag, or even both that they have on their licences. That choice is being denied to them by the UK government.
Question 2, Julie Morgan.
And what plans does the Welsh Government have to develop the higher education sector in Wales?
Well, we made a policy statement on higher education that was published in June of 2013. As the member will know, a review of higher education funding and student finance is currently underway, and the call for evidence has been issued.
I thank the First Minister for that response. Would he agree that the excellent results obtained in the research excellence framework, particularly in Cardiff University and in Swansea University, does increase the potential of Welsh universities to be leading players in the regenerations of our city regions?
Yes, I do. The results of the framework show that researchers in Wales are among the best in the UK and the world. We intend to continue to build on these excellent results. We have, of course, the ongoing investment in the research sector and programmes such as Sir Cymru. They deliver long-term sustainable economic and social benefits for Wales. And, of course, the broad range of support that we've put in place for science, innovation and commercialisation is important in terms of developing our universities in the future. We look forward to working with our universities in order to make them even more robust in facing the challenges that are out there in terms of competition from universities, not just in the rest of the UK, but around the world.
Angela Burns.
Presiding Officer, of course, Minister, I too join with you and with Julie Morgan in welcoming some of the great news that's coming out of our universities. And I'm sure you will agree with me that reputation is all important in developing the higher education sector in Wales. And therefore, First Minister, I wondered if you give your opinion on whether brand Wales should be used if the higher education sector in Wales finds itself once again hosting a group of confederated universities. Or would that risk casting a negative light on the sector, given brand Wales's tainted history in this regard?
I don't think Wales has a tainted history at all as a brand, nor as a nation. It's a matter, of course, for universities as to how they market themselves, whether they wish to collaborate, and we would encourage them to do that where that is the right thing to do, or whether they wish to promote themselves around the world. But I don't think in any way that promoting themselves as universities in Wales would mean that they would have a brand that was tainted. She refers, of course, to the University of Wales difficulties, which existed some years ago. That was with regard to a specific institution. I think we can overcome that and promote Wales as a place of learning and expertise.
Simon Thomas.
Diolch Llywydd. Wel, mwyn parhau ar gwaith ardderchog mewn rai prifysgolion o safbwynt ymchwil, i ni newydd weld yn yr ymchwiliad ymchwil, mae rhaid wrth gwrs parhau i fusoddi yn ein prifysgolion ni. Nawr, hyd yn oed 4 blynedd yn ôl, cyn cyflwyno'r polisi presennol o ffïoedd dysgu, roedd y prifysgolion yng Nghymru yn cwyno bod na bwlch gyllido o 64-65 miliwn. Ydy'n fwriad gyda chi, gyda'r adolygiad Diamond ar y arfaeth, i parhau os ych chi'n Prif Weinidog yn y cynulliad nesaf gyda'r system o gyllido presennol y gyfymyfyrwyr?
Wel, mae hwnna'n rhywbeth i manifestos y pleidiau, wy'n siwr o hynny. Mae yna fil o flaen y cynulliad prynhawn yma. Ni'n gwybod wrth gwrs bod yna heriau sydd yn wynebu'r sector, a wy'n siŵr bod pob plaid yn dod o'r polisïau o flaen etholwyr Cymru dros y flwyddyn nesaf.
We now move to questions from the party leaders, and first this afternoon we have the Leader of Plaid Cymru, Leanne Wood.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, the number of people waiting for longer than 4 hours at major A&E departments is rising, and figures show that for each of the past 3 Decembers, there has been little difference in the actual numbers of people attending those departments. In fact, there were slightly fewer people attending a major A&D last December than was the case in December 2013. What explanation can you give for the increase in the number of patients waiting longer for treatment at major A&E departments?
We have seen the pressures that have been placed, not just in Wales, but in England, in Scotland, and especially so in Northern Ireland. We expected the LHBs to come forward with their winter plans. Those plans have by and large been robust. And now, it's not right to say that A&E times are rising now. They're not. They are now dropping. But it is right to say that for around about a week, things were exceptionally difficult, and I thank NHS staff for the work that they did.
There's been no increase in the numbers of people actually attending A&E, but people are waiting longer when they're there. Isn't it the case that the problem is down to a lack of access to GPs and also the inability of GPs to refer on to community hospital beds because they've been cut? And on the other hand, beds in hospitals are being occupied by people who are not being able to be transferred into social care. Now, if you accept that these are the causes of some of these pressures, can you tell us what you intend to do about it, please?
Well, first of all, it's not right to say that the numbers of people coming into A&E have been stable for some years. We have seen a pressure in the last, well, it's about a fortnight ago now, that was the greatest pressure for 5 years. I think what she means is that the numbers of people coming through in December were below the numbers of people going through in the summer. That much is true, but then what we have found is that the people who come through A&E in the summer tend to be people quite often who have had accidents, they're out, they can be resolved very, very quickly. The people who come in the winter tend to have more complex conditions, particularly elderly people, and particularly respiratory conditions. That means they take longer to treat. So looking at the numbers doesn't give the full picture. Also bear in mind that the effect of the flu that we've seen has also had an effect on the staff. And that, of course, has meant that staff have not been available in the numbers that we would want because of the effect that the flu has had on them. So simply comparing July, for example, with December doesn't give a true comparison because, of course, the conditions treated in the summer are very different from the conditions treated in December.
I would accept, First Minister, that we have an ageing population. Many people have chronic conditions, and when those patients come to A&E, they will require more intensive care than some of the more straightforward conditions that we might see during the summer months. But there are pressures, and those pressures are twofold. And one of the reasons is down to a lack of doctors. And of course, you'll be aware that Plaid Cymru's proposals is to recruit an additional 1,000 doctors, proposals which you have dismissed. So why is it then that against this backdrop, the Welsh Government has slashed spending on doctor recruitment from over £45,000 in 2012-13 to less than £3,500 in this financial year? Is it not the case, First Minister, that due to such poor planning on your part, patients can expect further deterioration next winter?
No, because you have to remember, of course, that when we look at doctor recruitment, it's a world market, not a Welsh market. You can train as many doctors as you want in Wales, but if they don't stay in Wales, then it doesn't help you. What we need to do is to continue with the work of making sure that we have hospital departments that are attractive in terms of bringing in the top consultants. That is by far the most important factor. I've heard what you said about the 1,000 doctors. I mean, we've discussed this at length in this chamber. I mean, the questions I still would have are, which specialisms do you mean by 1,000 doctors, and where do they come from? Because they're not out there. There are great difficulties in saying that it's possible to recruit a substantial number of doctors when everybody knows that they are not there in those numbers. And it also is the case that it takes 10 years to train a consultant. You can't train somebody in a few years. Also, if you train people in Wales, they can just as easily go somewhere else to practice. What we need to do is to make sure, as we have been doing, that Wales is an attractive place to practice and bring doctors in from outside Wales in order to practice in Wales. And these are pressures and challenges that exist across Wales, England, Scotland and indeed Northern Ireland. We have the medical recruitment campaign. The vacancy rate that exists amongst doctors in Wales is very low, 5% or below. And of course, our LHBs do all that they can to recruit consultants where they are able to do, including advertising abroad, which is exceptionally important in what is a world market.
We now move to the Leader of the Welsh Liberal Democrats, Kirsty Williams.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, your government's 2008 framework for the foundation phase says, we aim to ensure that all children and young people are not disadvantaged by any type of poverty. Last week, a study by Cardiff University said that the foundation phase had not been associated with any significant changes in the differences in outcomes for children from poorer backgrounds. Why has the foundation phase not achieved its framework aims?
Well, the foundation phase, of course, is still fairly new. It has been there for some years, that's true. But it will take some time, of course, to understand how the foundation phase affects young children as they go through school up to the age of 16. The foundation phase of itself can't deliver a reduction in attainment levels. Pupil Deprivation Grant is one area where that can help. And, of course, schemes such as Schools Challenge Cymru, which seek to help those schools who need help the most.
First Minister, it was a stated aim in your framework for the foundation phase that it would assist in that particular goal, and I'm still not clear from your answer this afternoon why you feel that has not been achieved. 3 years ago, your then Education Minister, Leighton Andrews, described the literacy and numeracy framework as a key tool to transform standards of literacy and numeracy in Wales. Now, last week, Estyn found that the provision for the development of literacy remains just adequate, and that standards of literacy were much the same in 2014 as they had been in 2012. Is adequacy the transformation that your government was hoping for?
No, but bear in mind, of course, that literacy and numeracy as subjects being taught in the comprehensive schools, for example, have only just started. They started in September. That is when this cohort of students started studying those subjects as standalone subjects. And, of course, we expect to see an increase in literacy and numeracy as a result of the changes that, in fairness, have only been in place for the last 5 months.
First Minister, your then Education Minister said that that programme would be transformational. 2 years later, it is simply described by your own inspectors as adequate. Now, you would agree with me, I'm sure, that the key to Wales's future economic success is a highly skilled workforce, and that literacy and numeracy are the bedrock of that. We also know that tracking of individual pupils' attainment is successful. But last week's report goes on to say that the tracking of pupils' literacy skills remains underdeveloped in most schools. Now, Welsh Liberal Democrats have consistently called for a national tracking programme. Why is your government tolerating a system that means that most schools are not tracking the literacy skills of their pupils properly?
I don't believe that's fair or right. Bear in mind, of course, he is right to point out that the literacy and numeracy framework is something that we transformative. I think 2 years is pretty soon in terms of seeing the scale of that transformation. And for many students, as I've said, they started studying those subjects as discrete subjects in September. We expect to see that transformation take place in the next few years. And I'll give you an example. With what's happened with GCSEs, we know that the gap that did exist in terms of getting 5 good GCSEs with England has been almost closed. And we're in a good position this summer to be on a par, and we hope doing better than England when it comes to GCSEs. So we see that working through, we see the work the schools have done in terms of improving GCSE performance. I expect to see the literacy and numeracy framework having that transformative effect over the next few years.
We now move to the Leader of the Opposition, Andrew Davis.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, last week your government announced an additional £40 million to address the problems that A&E and the NHS in Wales have faced with the extraordinary pressures that have been placed on it. And we welcome that additional money to go into the NHS here in Wales. I mean, if you listened to us in the first place, then many of the emergency infusions... Well, the muttering can continue, but many of the emergency infusions that this government have made to the NHS since 2011 have caused real concern about, are they just a sticking plaster to cover up a gaping wound, excuse the pun, because what is serious here now is that you are just responding in a knee-jerk way to many instances that are facing us in the Welsh NHS. How can we have any confidence that that 40 million will actually buy some real resilience in the A&E service so that patients and clinicians will not find themselves facing the chronic weights and the pressures and stresses that they've had to face over recent weeks?
Well, I mean, first of all, we've done exactly odd enough what his party's done in England, which is provide extra money to cope with winter pressures. We had hoped that there would be a consequential. We were told firmly that there wouldn't be. So we've had to find that money from our own reserves. Now, in terms of how that money will be spent, we have the NHS winter plans in place. They've proven to be, by and large, robust. Nobody could have foreseen, this is not just true of Wales, it's true of all parts of the UK, the surge that would happen in 1 week, largely because of flu, and a particular strain of flu that was not identified as part of the vaccine for this year, presumably because it didn't exist at that time. And now, of course, we see that the pressures on A&E are diminishing compared to the very difficult situation that existed some 10 to 14 days ago. And we expect, of course, the LHBs now to use that money to make sure that the difficulties that all experienced over the past week or two continue to become less of an issue.
First Minister, you are wrong to say you've done the same as has happened at a UK level. The UK government made the money available in the summer of last year to address potential winter pressures that were anticipated for this winter. That is a fact. 400 million was made available in July. The real concern was welcoming the additional money is that it is just throwing money at the system without any long-term plan to address the resilience of the service to meet the demand spikes. Now, Tina Donnelly, for example, with the Royal College of Nursing, has talked of an additional 1,000 acute nurses are required to meet the demand that is placed week in, week out on the Welsh NHS. Do you believe that this time next year there will be more or less nurses in the Welsh NHS? And will your government be making any progress to address the concerns identified by Tina Donnelly and the shortage of nurses within the Welsh NHS?
We will always, of course, work with the RCN. I know Tina Donnelly's words that the NHS shouldn't be a political football, which echo the words of Jeremy Hunt, and their words I particularly welcome. We will always expect LHBs to staff departments at an appropriate level. There will be occasions, as we saw recently, when demand increases exponentially compared to what is normally the case. And, of course, we would expect LHBs to have plans in place to deal with such surges in demand, which, by and large, they did. I expect to see all departments in every hospital staffed at the correct level, whether it's doctors, nurses, whether it's support staff, physiotherapists, OT, speech and language therapists, all these professions come together in order to deliver on NHS.
I do notice, and others would have noticed, you gave no commitment as to the number of nurses we can expect this time in 12 months, whether we are going to have more nurses or less nurses. And I think some clarity on that so that the nurses who have been at the fighting edge of this crisis over the last 3 to 4 weeks could ultimately know that the Welsh Government is going to invest in their profession. But let me put another question to you then. The other pressure point seems to be the number of beds that are available in hospitals, as identified by the leading consultant at Wrexham Milo Hospital, when he said the beds just do not exist in the hospitals now so that we can move patients out of A&E and into the hospital environment. We've lost 20% of the beds over recent years within the hospital environment here in Wales as a direct decision of the funding commitments your government has made. Will there be more beds available in the Welsh NHS this time next year, or will we be facing the same situation of less beds available for surgeons to direct patients to that hospital environment?
Well, my understanding is that we have more beds per head in Wales than in England. And so it is the case. It is the case. It is absolutely true that that is the case.
20% less beds.
And the reality is then that if that is true, then England has seen some substantial reductions in bed numbers, well beyond what he even says is correct of Wales. And it's not simply a question of beds. It's a question of getting more people out of hospital when they're ready through delayed transfers, dealing with delayed transfers of care, which we're seeing increase in England because social services budgets are being cut. It is a fact that we have more beds per head in Wales than in England. It is secondly the case that beds are just part of the picture. It's important that people are able to return home as quickly as possible in order for those beds to be made available. And that's why, of course, we have focused very strongly on delayed transfers of care, which are going in the right direction in Wales. They're going in the opposite direction in England.
We now move back to questions on the paper, and question 3 is Eluned Parrott.
Diolch Llywydd. Will the First Minister make a statement regarding travel disruption that has resulted from rail improvement works in South Wales Central?
Rail infrastructure, of course, is non-devolved, but any disruption experienced by passengers as a result of these works is regrettable. We are working closely with Network Rail and the rail industry to ensure better performance and minimal disruption.
Thank you, First Minister. You'll know that the Windsor Bridge has been closed in Cardiff, and there may be other bridges in the area which will need to be closed at the same time. That will be closed for more than a year. And I've had complaints from local people that the diversion signs are small, infrequent and unclear. And from some directions, they actually still direct you over the closed road where there is an absent bridge. As project manager for Valleys Lines electrification, how will you ensure that this kind of disruption is minimised when we're having those transformational works on our own infrastructure? And can you liaise with Network Rail, Cardiff Council and the Trunk Road agencies to improve the current situation in Splot and Adamsdown, which is truly chaotic at some times?
Well, I'm not the project manager for electrification. I have many roles. That's one I think I'll have to decline at this stage. I think that the point she raises is this, and that's the sheer amount of time it's proposed to carry out these roads. And we have those concerns as well. You know, the fact, for example, that the Windsor Road Bridge will reopen next spring is of immense concern to us. We know that as a result of Valley Line's electrification, there will be other bridges that will need work. And what we do not want to see is work taking too long, for there to be disruption in many Valley communities, more than would otherwise be the case. And the same is true of the Windsor Road Bridge. I know that the Minister has requested regular updates from Network Rail, and I think it's fair to say we expect this work to be carried out as quickly as possible, because I know the disruption that's occurring, of course, for many citizens, not just of Cardiff, but for people who commute into the city.
Andrew Archie-Davies.
Thank you, Presiding Officer. First Minister, whilst traffic improvements generally are welcome, obviously the construction phase is obviously a challenge for traffic delays when that construction is taking place. One point, for example, in the Vale of Glamorgan, the Charleston Bends by Aberthaw, has been an horrendous bottleneck for anyone commuting from Llantwit Major or the Western Vale to their place of work. This is a Welsh Government project commissioned by your good selves that just seems to have gone on for ever and a day. Could I urge that the Welsh Government assess its management of that particular scheme and explain why there does seem to have been such a delay on this project that has caused such traffic chaos to the Western Vale of Glamorgan?
It is very difficult. As somebody who has sat in those lights both ways, I do understand that there are delays there. It's important, of course, to move ahead as quickly as possible with the work. We are doing that. There's bound to be some disruption in the meantime. The result will be a road that's far straighter than the fairly tricky bends that were there to begin with, and one, of course, that will help to connect more effectively the airport with St Athan.
Leanne Wood.
The independent public body Passenger Focus has found that travel disruption is not always conveyed clearly and concisely to passengers in South Wales Central. So, for example, when services have been cancelled, leaving coach travel as the only alternative means of transport home, that hasn't always been conveyed clearly to passengers, and it can lead to confusion and anger. Do you agree with me, First Minister, that passenger communication could be improved? And will you ensure that this is made an essential part of any discussions around the Plaid Cymru policy, which you've since adopted, for a train service run on a not-for-dividend subsidiary of the Welsh Government?
I think it's absolutely crucial for passenger information to be as clear as possible. It's disappointing to hear there are examples of where that may not have happened, but I would expect the train operators and, of course, Arriva, as the operator of the stations, to convey that information as clearly as possible. Nobody wants to see passengers stranded, having missed the last mode of transportation home.
Question 4, Nick Ramsey.
Yeah. How is the Welsh Government supporting the dairy industry?
Well, we have our Dairy Task Force, which is the ongoing independent review of the dairy sector, which is due to report shortly to ministers, and of course we have the Rural Development Plan.
Thank you, First Minister. It is claimed that the minimum price a dairy farmer can survive on is around 30 pence a litre. However, as you will know, and according to the National Farmers Union, some of their farmers have recently witnessed a drop of 10 pence per litre over the last year. And in fact, payments of just 20 pence have also been talked about. It's clear that many supermarkets operating in Wales are using milk as a loss leader to entice customers into their stores, and this ultimately will lead to a degradation in our dairy industry and knock-on effects for other aspects of farming as well. What pressure are you able to exert on supermarkets to guarantee that our dairy industry is paid a sustainable price that will support the industry as we move on months and years to come?
Well, the issue of the supermarkets is a matter for the UK government to take a view on, but there's no doubt at all that the current price of milk is unsustainable as far as most producers are concerned. Production costs in dairy do vary, but the reality is that the price that's on offer at the moment is not sufficient. It is a perpetual theme, unfortunately, in the dairy industry where prices do go up and down. It's particularly difficult at the moment because there's oversupply on the European market. And of course there will be concern for those who are dairy producers because of the knowledge that there's a spike in the summer, in production always. And to have this kind of price drop at this time of year is particularly concerning. That said, in terms of what the Minister has done, she has obviously taken a leading role in this. She made the written statement, and of course she has met with the Dairy Task Force and agreed the terms of reference. In terms of first milk, which I know is a particular issue for some dairy farmers, I know the Minister has met with First Milk. My concern, and I think it's worth saying this, is that First Milk has announced a 2-week payment holiday. As members will be aware, that should not be a permanent 2-week holiday. The deferral of payment should not be something that goes on in perpetuity in the future. Farmers deserve to be paid for what they've produced.
Clear Griffith.
Diolch Llywydd. Fyddwch chi'n ymwybodol hefyd, dwi'n siŵr Prif Weinidog, fod Pwyllgor Amgylchedd Bwyd a Materion Gwledig EFRA yn San Steffan wedi cyhoeddi adroddiad y bore yma ar brisiau llaeth ac ymhlith i argymhellion, wrth gwrs, mae galw ar roi mwy o bwerau i'r Groceries Code Adjudicator mwyn amddiffyn ffermwyr llaeth rhag cam ddefnydd grym o fewn y sector gyflenwi o gyfeiriad archachnadwydd yn benna, wrth gwrs. Nawr, dyma oedd union alwad aelod y Seneddol Plaid Cymru pan sefydlwyd y GCA 19 mis 2 flynedd yn ôl. A newch chi felly ysgrifennu at y Gweinidog Perthnasol yn San Steffan yn eu hannog nhw i fabwysiadu yr argymhellion penodol yna yn benna, wrth gwrs, i sicrhau bod ystod cyfrifoldebau y goruchwyliwr yn cyrraedd y lefel yna o fewn y gadwyn gyflenwi llaeth, ac hefyd, wrth gwrs, bod gan y goruchwyliwr y dannedd angenrheidiol mwyn sicrhau bod newydd yn digwydd.
Wel, mae Sefydliad y Gweinidog yn cysylltu gyda Llywodraeth San Steffan i roi barn ffermwyr Cymru ynglyn â'r sefyllfa ynglyn â llaeth. Os yna'n anodd, o achos y ffaith bod yna ormod o laeth ar gael ar hyn o bryd, a mae hwnna'n un reswm, dim y reswm, ond un reswm pan mae'r pris wedi gostwng. Ni gyd yn gwybod am beth sydd wedi digwydd yn archfarchnadau dros y blynydde, lle mae llaeth wedi cael ei werthu dan y pris mae wedi prynu'r llaeth am. Ond mae'n siŵr bod y Gweinidog yn parhau i gysylltu â Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig mwyn sicrhau bod y Llywodraeth hynny yn deall beth yw'r heriau mawr sydd yn wynebu ffermwyr Cymru ar hyn o bryd.
William Powell.
Diolch Llywydd. First Minister, one group of farmers that risks being particularly badly affected by the current dairy crisis is the Welsh organic sector. As the First Minister may well know, there's been an alarming exodus from organic in recent months, driven partly by market conditions, but also by concerns about proposals coming forward in the European Commission that may make it more difficult to retain and maintain organic accreditation. One initiative that's been particularly successful both in Italy and France in supporting the organic dairy sector has been to encourage the education and health authorities across those countries to actually source a proportion of their milk from organic farms. I wonder whether, in that context, First Minister, you'd consider working with your Cabinet colleagues to roll out a trial programme that might actually be a shot in the arm for the organic sector, as well as accruing benefits both to pupils and to hospital patients.
I understand the member's sentiments. I'd be careful, though, in terms of creating a situation where those Welsh dairy farmers who are not organic find it more difficult to supply, for example, public sector contracts. The organic dairy sector is one that, over the years, has shown that the price will fluctuate up and down quite dramatically quite often. Where the price goes up, lots of people then go into organic production. There's oversupply, those people then leave. It has yo-yoed back and forth, even to the extent where some organic suppliers have in the past simply sold their milk as conventional milk because the premium isn't high enough. So I mean, we've done, of course, over the years through the organic farming schemes, the support we've given to organic farming, and of course to the success of successful cooperatives like Calon Wen in terms of their promotion of organic milk across supermarkets in Wales. They have shown that they have found a market, but in terms of putting some Welsh dairy farmers in a more favourable position than other Welsh dairy farmers, I think we should be very careful about doing that.
Question 5, Roger Glyn Thomas.
A wnaeth y Prif Weinidog ddatganiad am argaeledd signal ffôn symudol yn Sir Gyfyrddin.
Wel, ni'n gweithio gyda'r diwydiant, gyda Ofcom a Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig sy'n gyfrifol, wrth gwrs, i wella'r sefyllfa. Ni moyn sicrhau, wrth gwrs, bod Cymru yn elwa o'r prosiect rhwydwaith symudol sydd yn dod o'r Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig, os mae hwnna'n mynd i barhau. A dwi'n mynd ar hyn o bryd os bydd hwnna yn parhau yn y dyfodol. A mae'n bwysig dros ben, wrth gwrs, i sicrhau bod mwy o signal ar gael i drigolion Sir Gar a drigolion Cymru Wledig.
Prif Weinidog, beth yw eich neges chi i drigolion ardaloedd fel Cwm Du a Salem, Talarllyche a Phimsaint, lle fes i yn gweithio yn ddiweddar gyda'r aelod seneddol Jonathan Edwards oherwydd bod i llinell ffôn sylfaenol nhw am arno fe, ac ar ben hynny doedden nhw'n gallu cael signal ffôn ar gyfer ffonau symudol. Ond nid oes na berygl gwirioneddol fod rhai yn ardaloedd gwledig ni yn mynd i gael ei gadael ar ei hôl gyda'r datblygiadau yma gyda signal ffôn symudol.
Dyna pam mae mor bwysig wrth gwrs i sicrhau bod y prosiect rwydwaith symudol yn cael effaith ar Gymru wledig. Yn ôl Ofcom, maen nhw'n gweud bod y ran fwyaf o bobl yn cael rhyw fath o signal, medden nhw, 99% o'r boblogaeth, wel, dwi ddim bosibl i fi gael signal yn y tŷ ym Mhenabont. So felly, dwi ddim yn credu bod hwnna'n hollol wir pob tro, falle. Ond ynglyn â trigolion Cymru wledig, lle mae'n amhosib ar hyn o bryd i gael unrhyw fath o signal. Mae'n bwysig dros ben bod Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig yn symud mlaen gyda'r prosiect hyn mwyn helpu trigolion Sir Gâr.
Keith Davis.
Diolch Llywyd. Mae signal ffonau symudol yn enwedig adeiladu ar rwydwaith 3G a 4G yn fater rwyfeisios wedi codi gyda pob darparwr gwasanaeth. Yn ddiweddar, mae datganiad y Llywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig i rannu mastiau mewn ardaloedd ble mae'r signal yn wan. Ydy'r Prif Weinidog yn cytuno fi bod cysylltiadau personol, preifat a busnes yn anfodol i fannau mynediad gwan yn feetholaeth, a bod angen i Lywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig sicrhau nad yw'r mastiau ar y cyd yn cael ei orlwytho ac achosi problemau pellach i drigolion lleol.
Wel, nid i sicrhau wrth gwrs bod yna fuddsoddiad ynglŷn â band eang yn ardaloedd gwledig Cymru. Pwysig dros ben felly bod yna fuddsoddiad gan Lywodraeth y Deyrnas Unedig a hefyd y cwmnïau preifat ynglŷn â signal ffonau symudol hefyd. Mae hwnna'n bwysig. Nawr, un o'r pethau wrth gwrs mae'r prosiect Prydeinig yn ceisio wneud yw sicrhau bod cwmnïau yn siaro y mastiau, lle bod nhw'n adeiladu rhai i hunain, a sicrhau wrth gwrs trwy wneud hwnna, a'r costiau maen nhw'n safio trwy wneud hwnna, yn cael ei ail-fuddsoddi yn y rwydwaith i hunain. Dyna pam mae'n holl bwysig bod y prosiect hyn o'r Deyrnas Unedig yn symud ymlaen.
Angela Burns.
Thank you very much, Presiding Officer. First Minister, I'm sure you agree that for rural communities, mobile phones and broadband are key drivers to the economic prosperity of those areas. And as Roger Glyn Thomas has already mentioned, I've identified some 24 postcodes in Carmarthen where the Superfast Cymru project will be unable to reach and will therefore go to the Superfast Cymru infill project. Now, you have said that you intend to roll out Superfast Cymru by 2016, but there's no indication as to when you will complete the infill project. During that time frame, aren't you concerned that this will lead to some serious digital inequality in these more rural areas?
Well, our target is, of course, to ensure that 96% of premises are connected by next year. That remains the target. There will be some properties in that 4% who are more difficult to reach, and the solutions for them may lie elsewhere other than through conventional line-provided broadband. But the target that we have always made public in this chamber and elsewhere is a target that we'll adhere to, and one which we believe will benefit so many communities in rural Wales that otherwise would never have access to broadband.
Question 6, Gwyn Price.
Thank you, Clywyd. Will the First Minister make a statement on the current level of Welsh students entering higher education?
Yes, the latest figures show that just over 100,000 Welsh domiciled enrolments took place at UK institutions. That was for the year 2013 to 14.
Thank you for that answer. First Minister, I was delighted to learn for the 2014 entry, Oxford University made the highest number of offers to the Welsh candidates in 4 years. I hope to see these figures rise in coming years following the Welsh Government's establishment of the national network of learning hubs to our brightest students, securing places in the UK's most prestigious universities. The Welsh Government's Oxbridge Ambassador Paul Murphy identified the perception of elitism presented a significant barrier to increasing the application to Oxbridge, and that alumni are uniquely placed to help dispel this view. What will alumni play in the new programme?
Well, we are developing an alumni engagement strand, and the expectation is twofold. Firstly, that it'll help to dispel some myths about Oxford, Cambridge and other leading universities, and to show that as it were, show our students that people like them can also, of course, go to a world-leading university. The second thing that we want to explore is to work with the partnership hubs to support students with interview preparation and, of course, with the delivery of super curricular, extracurricular even, and subject-specific activities.
Susie Davis.
Clywed. Well, thank you for that answer to Gwyn Price, First Minister. I think that a response to the review was necessary, and a quick response, particularly in view of Eston's ongoing complaints that the children from the poorest backgrounds who are bright are not being offered the kind of opportunities that you would expect they would receive. How confident are you that this hub model will persuade all schools, and I mean all schools, to promote the expectation that they may house children who would benefit from an Oxbridge education, and that every school is able to provide the practical support to those students if they would so benefit?
Well, we're grateful to Paul Murphy, who is our Oxbridge ambassador, who's done so much work on this. And we're confident that the partnership hubs will support students, particularly with interview skills. Quite often, of course, that is an area of weakness in young people. And that is something that we want to help them with, because quite often that interview is so crucial in terms of gaining an offer to get to some of the leading universities. And the partnership hubs will help to make sure that our young people do understand that they're fully able to apply to universities such as Oxford and Cambridge, and fully able, of course, to go there having achieved the grades required as part of their offer.
Bethan Jenkins.
First Minister, obviously statistics are showing England and Wales based stats with regards to women entering university, and looking at the stats earlier, I saw that there was a lower proportion of women entering architecture, building and engineering studies, and I think that it's something that we should be focusing on if we are trying to encourage women to look at alternative studies, and not just what they believe that perhaps some of the school career service would apply to them. So I wonder what you are doing as a government to look at this in a more wider, in more detail, so that we can get to grips with this issue.
I entirely agree. Under no circumstances should the impression be given that architecture, building, engineering, these are for young men. And just to give one example of where that's helped dispel the work of ESW, and the work that they have done with encouraging young women into engineering. That has borne fruit. Still not quite there yet in terms of people's perceptions of a subject like engineering, but the direction is right. Things are moving in the direction that we would want, and of course the support that we've put in place to help get the right kind of advice to young women in order that they can study these subjects where their talents and skills are needed.
Question 7, Russell George.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the Welsh Government's priorities to grow the Welsh agriculture industry in 2015?
Well, our priority is to ensure that the farming industry in Wales is profitable, sustainable, resilient and professionally managed.
The current state and future of the and development of the dairy industry in Wales continues to be a concern. I appreciate the earlier questions on this. Last week I was pleased to host your colleague, the Deputy Minister, onto a dairy farm in my constituency to listen first-hand to farmers' concerns. That we're not just about the farm gate pricing, but also how they are expected to invest in their businesses to grow them over the longer term. Clearly, they're struggling to keep their heads above water at the moment. Now, data from the 2014 Welsh Dairy Farmers Survey reports show that 50% of respondents have invested less than £100,000 in their businesses over the last 5 years, which is relatively low considering the high capital cost of maintaining a dairy unit. So can I ask what the Welsh Government is doing now to examine its grant schemes to incentivise and make it easier for Welsh dairy farmers to access funding, and also how the Government intends to use the RDP to increase opportunities to access capital funding for growth?
Well, Farming Connect, of course, has been very successful over the last 14 years. In terms of providing assistance to farmers who wish to diversify. It doesn't mean diversify out of agriculture necessarily, but to enable their farms to become more sustainable. There are always discussions, of course, with the industry to help shape, for example, our agricultural strategy in the future. The member will be aware of the Young Entrant Support Scheme that's also in place in order to help those enter into farming, and the perpetual challenge in farming is the age balance of those in farming. a tendency, particularly in farming families, I know, for people to carry on farming and wait for some time before passing the farm on to their children. That's an old tradition. So being able to keep those young people in farming is also important in terms of the industry sustainability in the future.
Rina, Fiorwydd.
Diolch, Llywydd. Mae'n blaenoriaeth yn Ynys Môn i adfer capacity lladdau yn y gogledd o'r llewyn, siawns bod yn blaenoriaeth i Gymru gyfan hefyd o ran peidio colli y lefi. Rwan, mi nath y diwydiant amaeth a darpar brynwyr bopeth allan nhw, dwi'n meddwl, i fod wedi ceisio ailagor lladdau Welsh Country Foods yn y geirwen. Mi nath swyddogion y Llywodraeth hefyd wrth gwrs chwarae i rhan. Felly dwi'n siomedig iawn, dwi'n siŵr bydd y Prif Weinidog yn rhannu'n siom i glywed adroddiadau rwan bod y safle hwnnw yn cael ei stripio. A wneith y Prif Weinidog yn gyntaf longyfarch pawb nath geisio gweithio tuag at ailagor y lladdau, a allo geisio rhoi ateb i ni be'n union aeth o'i le efo'r ymdrechion bryd hynny. Mae hwn yn safle wrth gwrs sydd wedi derbyn arian sylweddol gan y Lywodraethau yn y gorffennol, ac a wneith o roi addewid y bydd y Llywodraeth yn taflu pwysau tu ôl i unrhyw ymdrechion yn y dyfodol i bosib agor lladdau llai ar gyfer y farchnad leol yn gyntaf, ond alla dyfu o hynny.
Gai ddiolch i'r aelod am y geiriau twym o dyfa tuag at pa oedd wedi ymdrechu'n galed iawn mwyn sicrhau dyfodol i'r safle. Colli marchnad, wy'n credu, os gofiau oedd y broblem, ac wrth gwrs weithiau gyda lladdau un prynwr sydd yn nhw weithiau, os mae'r prynwr yn mynd rhywle arall, felly mae yna broblemau mawr ynglyn â dyfodol y lladdau i hunan. Siomedig wrth gwrs i weld bod y lladdau yn cael ei stripio, fel wedodd e. Ac wrth gwrs, mae'n siomedig dros ben i feddwl bod yna ddim cynlluniau ar hyn o bryd ta beth i sicrhau bod y lladdau yn ail agor. Ond i wastad wedi gweithio'n agos iawn gyda chwmnïau sydd yn rhedeg lladdau yng Nghymru, mwyn sicrhau, wrth gwrs, bod yna ddigon o capacity yng Nghymru i ladd yn enwedig cig coch, cig o'n enwedig a hefyd cig idon sydd yn bwysig dros ben. Ond wrth gweud hynny, wrth gwrs, mae'n bwysig bod capacity gyda ni yn cig gwyn hefyd, mae hwnna'n wir. Achos beth ni ddim moyn gweld yw'r sefyllfa lle mae rhan fwyaf o gig o anifeiliaid yng Nghymru yn cael ei lladd neu difa yn Lloegr. A wedyn ni, wrth gwrs, mae yna effaith ar arian sydd ar gael yn ôl y lefi.
Kirsty Williams.
First Minister, farmers in the Elan Valley in my constituency welcome very much the government's change of heart with regard to the Moorland line payments. However, that change of heart now leads to a certain amount of uncertainty with regards to what the Welsh Government's basic scheme will look like. Could you explain to me how a group of upland farmers identified sections of the Government's proposed scheme that did not comply with the relevant EU regulations, whilst the Welsh Government, its ministers and all its resources managed to overlook the same regulations?
Decided, the pot of money will remain the same. Of course, we will put in place a scheme that is in place as quickly as possible, with a view, of course, to ensuring there are no delays in any payments towards the end of the year. And that is something that we committed to. I committed to in this chamber last week, and I know the Minister has also done so publicly.
Question 8, Jeff Cuthbert.
Will the First Minister make a statement on the Auditor General for Wales's report on the effects of the UK Government's welfare reform programme?
Well, we've repeatedly expressed our concern about the UK Government's welfare reforms and the scale, scope and speed of those changes. And I am pleased the report recognises the Welsh Government's significant investment to help people cope with the impact of those reforms, and we are considering the report's findings in detail.
Thank you for that response, First Minister. As you say, the report published the week before last confirmed the worst fears of many of us on this side of the chamber, namely that the Tory-led UK government's misguided welfare reform programme has ended up hitting the most vulnerable. Citizens' advice bureaus across Wales have reported being inundated with cases of benefit and welfare-related problems. Nevertheless, the report does highlight the good work being done by Labour-controlled Caerphilly County Borough Council to help those affected by welfare reforms, by working with Dŵr Cymru, and with the Job Centre Plus in order to help some of the most vulnerable citizens. First Minister, will you agree with me that we need to see more of this kind of support being provided by other local authorities across Wales? And will you also agree with me that the Welsh Government will continue to work with all of its partners to help combat the worst effects of Tory welfare reform?
Well, one thing we know, and that is that the party opposite getting into government after May, there's a lot worse to come. A lot worse to come. According to the Institute for Fiscal Studies, a 26% cut in real terms, in terms of welfare benefit provision. I welcome the approach that Caerphilly County Borough have adopted as part of their financial exclusion policy to support and promote all of the benefits, tax credits and financial help available to people. And of course I would encourage other local authorities to consider a similar successful model.
Mark Isherwood.
Well, because of housing benefit reforms, of course, they were introduced in response to overcrowding and waiting lists inherited. Guidance on discretionary housing payments was issued by the DWP from 2011, with priority for disabled people in adapted accommodation or reliant on local support. But the report highlights concern with the allocation, distribution, administration and use of those payments and significant inconsistencies and weaknesses by local authorities. What action will the Welsh Government take to communicate to local authorities the recommendations made by the report to improve management, access to and use of discretionary housing payments?
These are things that we are considering as part of the report, and we'll consider our response. It is a great shame that local authorities are having to clear up the mess that's been created by the UK government, and we all know, of course, how deep that mire will get if the result goes the wrong way in May.
Thank you. I have accepted